Hi, everybody. It's Miss Amy, and I'm a little sad today because this is our last chapter of The Indian in the Cupboard by Lynne Reid Banks. But that's all right because starting tomorrow, I'm going to read Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach. So look back tomorrow, even though we'll be done with The Indian in the Cupboard. Now, boys and girls, remember, I do not own the rights to this book. I just own the book. All right, so yesterday we left the chapter and they found the key. Whoop, whoop, and they were able to bring the military man back in so he can help Boone get better. And of course, in all that, Little Bear got upset again at Boone and almost hurt him again. I tell you, that Little Bear's got a very, very, very big temper, but a short wick. So today we're going to read the last chapter, chapter 16 of The Indian Cupboard, called Brothers. Omri had fully intended to go to sleep. Patrick did almost immediately, but Omri couldn't, tired though he was. Instead, he lay in the candlelight, his head turned toward the table where Boone lay, and Little Bear sat cross-legged next to him. Erect and watchful, sometimes Omri would close his eyes, but he did no more than doze. Each time he opened them, he would meet Little Bear's unblinking stare. It was partly the rat that kept Omri awake. It pattered around under the floor for hours, making Omri nervous, but he never came anywhere near the men. No, that wasn't the main thing. The main thing was Omri's thoughts. Ooh, do you ever stay up and just can't sleep because your mind won't shut off? I know that I do quite often. I'm an overthinker. What was he going to do? He would bring Little Bear's woman to life as he had promised. But then what? It had been hard enough with only one little being to feed, protect, and keep secret. Much harder after Boone came. Now there'd be 3, and one a woman. Young as he was, Omri knew that 1 woman and 2 men spelled trouble. And what if there should be children? For all Little Bear's unpredictable moods, his demands, his occasional cruelties, Omri liked him. He wanted to keep him, but he knew now that was impossible. Whichever way he thought about it, the end was the same disaster of some kind. Whatever magic had brought this strange adventure about must be put to use again to send the little people back to their own place and time. Uh-oh. Miss Amy's getting a little sad. Having decided this, however, sadly and reluctantly, Omri's stressful thoughts let go their hold on him. He drifted off to sleep. When he opened his eyes again, dawn was breaking. The morning chorus of birds was just beginning. The candle had burned itself out. The rat had gone to sleep. So had Little Bear, nodding over his bow. Omri peered closely at Boone. The yellow field dressing on his wound moved steadily up and down. His skin had lost that gray look. He was better. Of course, Little Bear shouldn't have gone to sleep, but just the same, he had done his best. Omri slipped out of bed. His blazer was hanging from the hook at the back of his door. He took the paper bag with the woman in it out of the pocket. Moving on tiptoe, he went to the cupboard, took out the plastic soldier, put in the plastic Indian girl, and locked the cupboard door again. When he heard little movements, he unlocked the cupboard and opened the door a crack so she wouldn't be frightened in the dark. Then he got back into bed, covered himself up, all except his eyes, and stayed perfectly still to watch what would happen. At first, nothing did. Then slowly, stealthily, the door was pushed a little further open. Out crept a beautiful Indian girl. There was enough light in the room now for Omri to see the black of her hair, the chestnut brown of her skin, the bright red of her dress. He couldn't see her expression, but he guessed she was bewildered. She glanced all around the room, and at once spotted Boone lying on the ground and Little Bear dozing beside him. She approached them cautiously. For a few moments she lingered behind Little Bear, clearly not sure whether she should touch and wake him or not. She decided against it, and circling Boone's feet, sat herself cross-legged on the other side facing Little Bear. She sat staring at him. The three of them were so utterly still that they might still have been plastic. Then a blackbird outside gave a particularly loud chirp, and Little Bear sat up sharply. At once he saw her. His whole body gave a jolt. Omri felt a prickling up the back of his neck. The way they looked at each other, it went on a long time. Then slowly, and both together, they rose to their feet. Little Bear spoke to her quietly in a strange language. She answered. He smiled, standing there on either side of Boone, not touching. They talked for some minutes in low voices. Then he put out his hand, and she put out hers into it. Well, that moved quickly. They stood silently. Then their hands dropped. Little Bear pointed at Boone and began talking again. The little girl crouched down, touched Boone gently and expertly. She looked up at Little Bear and nodded. Then Little Bear looked around the room. He saw Omri. Omri put his finger to his lips and shook his head as if to say, "Don't tell her about me." Little Bear nodded. He took the girl by the hand and led her to the seed box, up the ramp, and into the longhouse. After a moment or two, he came out again. He ran the length of the table till he stood on its edge as near to Omri as he could. "Do you like her?" Omri asked. Little Bear put his hands to his belt and unfastened it. "I like. Fit wife for chief. I pay much for her." And he handed Omri the belt, made of shiny white beads. "Now, Omri, hear Little Bear. Woman say Boone good, not die. Little Bear pleased. Omri take Boone. Put a long house. Woman take care. Give little medicines." He held up the pill box. "Omri get food. Make wedding feast." "How can you have a wedding feast with only 2 Indians?" "Yes, not good. Omri make more Indian. Come to feast?" he asked hopefully. When Omri shook his head, Little Bear's face fell. "Little Bear, wouldn't you rather have your wedding feast at home with your own tribe?" Little Bear was no fool. He understood at once. He stood still staring at Omri. "Omri put in box? Send back?" he said. His voice was very flat. Omri couldn't tell if he liked the idea or not. "What do you think? Wouldn't it be better?" Very slowly the Indian nodded his head And Boone? Boone too. Make him my brother first. Yes. Then I'll send you all back. When? When Boone's well enough. Once Omri had decided every day had passed was important because it was one day nearer to the last. It's getting sad, boys and girls. Patrick was as sad as he was, but he didn't argue against Omri's decision. It's the only way, really, Patrick said. After that, he didn't talk about it anymore. He just tried to be at Omri's house as much as possible. He couldn't do things with Boone much, of course, even though in a day or two Boone was sitting up in the longhouse and demanding to talk to his horse, which was brought to this entrance for the purpose, and whining for all sorts of special food and drink. I can't be expected to get my strength back if you won't give me some of the hard stuff, he nudged. He even pretended to have a relapse. Omri pinched a nose dropper full of whiskey from his parents' drink cupboard and squeezed a large drop down Boone's throat before the Indian girl, whose name was Bright Stars, a reference to her shining eyes, Omri supposed, had succeeded in conveying the fact that Boone was perfectly all right and that his faint was fake. Still, after he'd had his drink, Boone seemed so much better that Omri and Patrick decided it wouldn't do any harm. He's used to it after all. And thereafter, Boone got a liquor ration 3 times a day and did very well on it. He'll be ready to go back tomorrow, said Omri on the 4th day, when Boone, having had a leg up from Little Bear, managed to ride his horse around the seed box at a steady walk. They'll probably look after him better than we can in his own time. A thought struck him, and he fished out his pocket the drawing Boone had done. Boone, is this your hometown? Sure is. Omri studied it closely under the magnifying glass. Away up the street he saw a little sign reading, Doctor. Is he a good doctor? About as good as any out west, I reckon. Fish a bullet out of a man's arm or cut his foot off for snake bite as neat as can be. I seen him bring a pal o' mine back from the dead, near enough by putting a hot coal in his belly button. He never operates till a man's dead drunk, and he don't charge extra for the liquor neither. Omri and Patrick looked at each other. You'd feel that you were in good hands with this, doctor looking after you, Patrick asked worriedly. Sure would. Anyhow, don't need no sawbones now and my wound's healing up fine. So long as I get my whiskey, I'll be as good as new. Boone bore not the slightest ill word toward Little Bear for having shot him. That there's a Injun natural nature. Poor simple critter could no more help himself than I can keep away from my horse and my bottle. Sounds like Boone might have a little bit of a problem with drinking. What do you think, boys and girls? The night before Omri had decided to send them back, they held the brotherhood ceremony. I wish we could ask our brothers, said Patrick to Omri at school that day. Supposing we tell them one day about this, they'll never believe us. Sending them back, said Omri slowly, doesn't mean the magic won't work anymore. I'm going to put the key away somewhere so I won't be tempted, but it will always be there. Patrick looked at him wonderingly. I never thought of that, he said slowly. So there'd be nothing to stop us, months or even years from now, from bringing Boone and Little Bear back again to visit. I don't know, said Omri. Maybe their time is different from ours. It wouldn't be awful if they were old, or... But he couldn't say. dead. Both Boone and Little Bear came from such dangerous times. Omri shivered and changed the subject. As for our brothers coming, he said, all I want of my brothers is to keep that rat in its cage. The rat had been caught by Omri after a long, patient wait with cheese and a fishing net, and Omri had threatened Gillian with the worst fate imaginable if he let it get away again. The two boys went to Yap's after school and bought feast foods for the ceremony: salted nuts, chips, and chocolate. Omri bought a quarter-pound of the best meat at the butcher's for tiny hamburgers. A teaspoonful would have been enough, but the butcher wasn't interested in that. They got bread, biscuits, cake, and soda from Omri's mother, and Omri sneaked another drop full of the hard stuff, without which Boone would certainly not consider a festive occasion at all. Sammy's getting a little sad. For real. See, boys and girls, books can really stir up your emotions. It's very good to read. And imagine, and they can take you places you've never been. And then, of course, there's the books that tell you, things that we might want to learn. Okay, enough getting all teary-eyed, Miss Amy. It's time to finish this book already. Omri was rather surprised Boone had agreed to be brother to a stinking redskin at all, but Boone actually seemed rather to like the idea. "'Tain't just anyone gets to be brother to an Injun chief, he said proudly as he rolled up his sleeve, and Bright Stars carefully swabbed his arm with soap and water. But when he saw Little Bear sharpening his knife on a pebble, he turned pale. "Heck, it'll hurt," he muttered, but Patrick told him not to be a coward. "It's only a little nick. It's nothing at all." "Easy for you," retorted Boone. "I ain't so sure this is such a nice idea after all." But he cheered up when he saw the campfire being kindled and smelled the meat Bright Star was cooking on a pointed stick. And when Omri gave him a good swig from the dropper, he swaggered up to Little Bear and offered his arm with a drunken flourish. "Chop away, brother," he said loudly. Little Bear went through a whole routine, first cleaning himself, offering up loud chanting prayers to the spirits, and performing a marvelous stomping dance around the fire. Then he nicked his own wrist with the point of his knife. The blood welled up. Boone took one look and burst into tears. "I don't wanna! I changed my mind!" he bawled. But it was too late for that. Little Bear seized his arm, and before Boone knew what was happening, that the deed was done. Bright Stars bound their wrists together with a strip of hide torn from the hem of her red dress. Boone looked at it in a bemused way and said, "Gee whiz, we done it. I'm part Injun. Well, I guess I can't say nothing against 'em in the future." Then the two brothers sat on the ground, and Bright Stars served them the cooked meat and all the rest of the feast. Patrick and Omri offered their congratulations and stared in on their own food. They kept the campfire going with tiny bits of broken matchsticks and a bit of coal dust Omri had collected in the outside bunker, which then sprinkled on the flame made a spit-minute sparks. Looking at it and the three little figures around it, the boys gradually lost their sense of size altogether. "I feel as if I were the same as them," murmured Patrick. "Me too," said Omri. I wish we were all the same size. Then there'd be no problems. Don't be funny. No problems? With 2 full-grown Indians and a 6-foot crying cowboy? I meant if we were small, if we could enter their world, sleep in the longhouse, and ride the horses. I wouldn't mind eating one of those hamburgers, said Omri. Bright Stars was now crouched by the fire, tending it, singing softly. One of the horses whined. Boone seemed to have dropped off to sleep, leaning on Little Bear's shoulder. Little Bear, alone, was aware of the boys watching them. He beckoned to Omri with his free hand. Miss Amy's getting a little emotional over this book. When Omri bent to hear him, he said, Now. Now? You mean to go back? Good time. All happy. Not wait for morning. Omri looked at Patrick. He nodded slowly. When you go into the cupboard, Omri said, you must hold Bright Stars, or she may not go back with you. Woman go back with Little Bear. Little Bear hold. No let go. And horse. Little Bear only Iroquois with horse. But Boone must go separately. Don't drag him back to your time. Your people would kill him, even if you are his new brother. Little Bear looked at Boone, asleep at the side and at their joined wrists. Then he took his knife and cut the thong that bound them together. Patrick gently lifted Boone up. Don't forget his hat. He'd never forgive us if we let him leave that behind. To be safe, they sat Boone on his horse. Cowboys often ride in their sleep. And he didn't stir as Little Bear led him down the ramp across the table and up another ramp that Omri stood against the rim of the cupboard. I'm going to guess he was asleep, but probably because he had too much to drink in their celebration becoming blood brothers. Which Miss Amy does not recommend you do, boys and girls. There are too many germs in blood. And that's just gross and it's unsafe. No blood brothers and sisters. Then Little Bear went back to the seed box. Carefully, he and Bright Stars put on the fire with earth. Little Bear took a last look at the longhouse. Then he put Bright Stars into the horse's back and led them after Boone. Why didn't they put the horse up, or the house up there, and put them near it or touching it so it could go back too, I wonder? I guess that could be dangerous. If they took the longhouse back with them, it might fall on somebody like Dorothy's house did in the Wizard of Oz. All right. If Miss Amy could just stop getting misty-eyed now. They stood all together on the bottom of the cupboard. Nobody spoke. Omri had his hand on the door when Patrick suddenly said, I'm going to wake Boone up. I don't care. I've got to say goodbye to him. Hearing his name, Boone woke up himself. So suddenly he nearly fell off his horse and had to clutch the high pommel of his saddle. What you want, kid? He asked Patrick, whose face was close to him. You're going home, Boone. I wanted to say goodbye. Boone stared at him, and then his face slowly crumbled, kind of like Miss Amy's keeps doing during this book. I'm gonna pull it together. I'm sorry, boys and girls. Yep, movies make me cry, and now even books have made me cry. I can't stand saying goodbye, he choked out as his tears began to stream. He pulled a huge red grubby handkerchief from his pocket. I just refuse to say it, that's all. I'll only bust out crying if I do. And he blew a trumpet blast from his drew a trumpet blast on his nose. Miss Amy might need some tissue here, too. Omri and Little Bear were staring at each other. Something else was needed, some special farewell. It was Little Bear who thought of it. Omri, give hand. Omri put his hand forward. The horse braced his legs, but Little Bear held him steady. Little Bear took hold of Omri's little finger, drew his knife, and pricked it in a soft part. A drop of blood appeared. Then Little Bear solemnly pressed his own right wrist against the place and held it there. Brother, he said, looking up at Omri. Sorry, boys and girls. That's right, Miss Amy's crying over a book. It's just very touching is all. Brother, he said, looking up at Omri with his fierce black eyes for the last time. Omri withdrew his hand. Little Bear jumped onto the back of his horse behind Bright Stars, holding her around the waist so that he, she, and the horse made one unit that could not be separated during whatever kind of unearthly journey they had to make together through the unknown regions of time, space, proportion. Little Bear raised his arm in the Indian salute. Omri put his hand on the door. He nearly couldn't do it. He had to set his teeth. Boone and his horse stood patiently, but the Indian's horse started to prance and sidle. It put up its head and gave a long, challenging neigh. And here's a picture. Let's see, there's a glare. Here is Bright Stars and Little Bear, and here's Boone on his horse, and they're inside the cupboard. Let's see. Now, cried Little Bear. Omri drew in his breath, closed the door, and turned the key. He and Patrick stood frozen with the sadness, the strangeness of it. The magic was working at this moment. Both of them silently counted to 10. Then, very slowly, Omri, whose hand had not left the key, turned it back again and swung the door open. There they were, the two plastic groups, forms, out of lines, shells of the real creatures they had been. Each boy lifted out his own and helplessly examined it. So they pulled out their toys. So Patrick had Boone and his horse, of course, and Omri had Little Bear, Bright Star, and their horse. The life-giving details were blurred. Plastic can't show fine beadwork, the perfection of hair and muscle, the folds of hide, the sheen of horse's coat, or the beauty of a girl's skin. The figures were there, but the people, the personalities were gone. Patrick's eyes met Omri's. Both were wet. We could bring them back just as quick, Patrick said huskily. No. I know they're home by now. Omri put his group, the Indian, the girl, and the horse on the shelf nearest his bed, where he could see it easily. He laid the beaded belt still real beside it. Patrick slipped the mounted horse into his pocket, keeping his hand around it almost as if to keep it warm. Then Omri took the key and left the room. His mother was in the kitchen getting everyone a hot drink before bed. She took one look at Omri's face and her hands became still. What happened? What's wrong? Nothing, Mum. I want you to keep this key. I lost it. Lucky I found it again. You told me it was important. Better if you keep it, please. She nearly refused, but then, looking at him, she changed her mind and took the key from him. I'll get a chain and wear it, she said, like I always meant to. You won't lose it, will you? She shook her head and suddenly reached for him and hugged his face against her. He was shaking. He broke away and ran back to his room, where Patrick was still standing with his hand in his pocket, gazing at the cupboard. Come on, I'm going to put all sorts of medicines in it, Omri said loudly. Bottles and pills and stuff Mum's finished with. We'll pretend it's a doctor drug cupboard, and we can mix lots of them together. His voice petered out. Those were silly games, such as he had played before. He didn't feel the slightest interest in them now. I'd rather go for a walk, said Patrick. But what shall I do with the cupboard? Asked Omri desperately. Leave it empty, said Patrick, in case. He didn't say in case what, but he didn't have to. Just to know you could. That was enough. The end. Boys and girls, Miss Amy got a little emotional, didn't she, in this chapter? I'm sorry. This is one of my favorite books my teacher read me. And I'm so glad I got to share it with you. The Indian in the Cupboard by Lynne Reid Banks. See, boys and girls, books can take us on a journey we may never have gone. I would have never thought of that on my own had I not ever read it. So thank you so much for putting up with Miss Amy's silliness, her tongue ties, her jumbles, so I can be blessed by sharing one of my favorite books with you. Now, boys and girls, Miss Amy's going to pull herself together. I'm going to purchase the second Indian in the Cupboard book, so a sequel to this book, so I can read it with you. But while we wait for that one to come in, and we might have to finish that one, of course, finish it first, but I will read to you Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach beginning tomorrow. If you're reading this before you go to bed, I just want to thank you one more time for letting me share this book with you and get emotional. I encourage you to find a book you would like to read. I'd say write in the comments what you wanted me to read next, but the comments are disabled. So I just am glad I got to read it with you, and I hope I pick another good book for you to read with us after we're done with the whole Indian in the Cupboard series and Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach beginning tomorrow. Thank you, boys and girls and families, for listening to me and watching me get teary-eyed and still listening to me. And I look forward to reading to you tomorrow. And if you're reading this before you go to sleep tonight, or excuse me, if you're listening and watching this before you go to sleep tonight, good night and sleep tight.